First item on the agenda is vote to recommend to the full school committee that it approve MIAA and DESE school sports program modifications due to COVID-19.
And let me just take a roll
Ms.
call.
Hurst? Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, great, fantastic.
No problem. So Ms. Hurst,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
and Ms. Gresham is absent, and she let me know that, so she won't be able to make this meeting.
Great. So I am going to turn it over to Superintendent Warwick.
Thanks, Denise. So as we talked about a few weeks ago at the school committee meeting, we were waiting to get all the recommendations together and waiting for Dwayne to work with other ADs to see what some other communities were doing to see if we wanted to make some changes, but go ahead with our sports program. It's a school committee decision relative to whether we move it forward or not. So we're bringing it through the subcommittee like we always do. Dwayne and Lydia have done a great job of pulling it all together, so I'll have them go through it with you. I think they put some really great recommendations for you. So you wanted to proceed with the sports season. I think they have some really thoughtful recommendations to move forward with.
Fantastic. Assistant Superintendent Lydia Martinez and AD Dwayne Early, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Denise. So as Superintendent Warwick said, this is a follow-up to the working session that we had when we actually sent you guys all the MIAA, DESE, and EEA guidance. And so because we are going fully remote and because our district is in what we're calling the yellow zone for COVID, we have to have approval from the school committee. And so, Terry, can you share the recommendations? Based on those guidelines and based on talking to, not that one, the one, sorry, Terry.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Which one? The MIAA?
Yeah, the recommendation one that Dwayne sent you?
Yep, I have it up. You guys can't see it?
No, I'm still seeing the agenda.
Oh, okay, hold on.
Agenda.
Sorry.
Okay.
Let me.
And
Get
so
rid of
based on all that, Dwayne has been to different meetings and in touch with other ADs. And so I'll turn it over to him to walk you through the recommendations based on the high, medium, and low risk sports and what we're thinking for your input. So Dwayne, I turn it over to you as soon as Terry gets
Is
the
it there?
recommendations up. No?
Oh, I'm paused. I'm not sure. Josue, oh, here we go. There. No.
You might have to stop the share and then reshare it.
Yeah.
And so while Terry gets that up and running, these are just for the fall sports. And so we'll be back to you depending on what the guidance are for the remainder of the year sports. So Dwayne, I'll turn it over to you now.
Do you guys see that?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you, Terry.
All right.
That's great, Tara. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. As she spoke to just a few minutes ago, we did present a few weeks ago the sports that would be offered in the city of Springfield. There are 6 sports that are offered in the fall that SPS is offering. We have volleyball, soccer, which fall in the moderate, and then we have high risk, which is cheerleading and football, and then the low risk are cross country and golf. So as you can see on the screen, some of the recommendations that myself and Lydia have worked with are to be played. The low risk sports being cross country, played under the guidelines of the EEA and the DESE with the sport specific modifications that were voted on by the MIAA. Also in the low risk category, we have golf, which can be played under the guidelines of the EEA and the DESE and the sports modifications as well that were voted on by the MIAA. And then we have 2 sports that are offered in SPS that fall under the moderate risk category, which are soccer and volleyball. My recommendation is that we attempt to play soccer under the guidelines. However, volleyball, which is also in the moderate risk category, I do not recommend being played as it is inside. We're trying to stick with the outside sports to. We think that's probably the most safest route to go is sticking with outside. So volleyball, however, it being in moderate risk, we do not recommend that being played and postponing that to fall two. The next category, which is to be postponed into the fall two, which is the March-April timeframe, as I spoke to, that would be volleyball due to it being inside, as well as cheer, which is also the facilities that need to be used for cheer are also inside. For the high-risk sports, we have football, which if voted yes, we would have practice only, no game competitions, and the practice would have to be followed under the modifications and under the guidelines set forth. The guidelines and modifications for football are that they can practice in groups of 10. However, those groups of 10 have to stay consistent. They can't switch out and you practice one day with a group of 10 and then you go to another group of 10. The group of 10s also have to be separated by 14 feet. Again, football won't be played competitively. It would be practice only, and it would be competitive in the fall season 2 in March and April.
So, Latonya, I have some questions. Do you want to start? I'll give you, if you want to start first, I'm good with that, or I can just jump in.
How about you ask the questions, because I may have similar questions, and then if I have anything else, then I can add to what you ask.
All right, thank you, AD Early and Assistant Superintendent Martinez. I know that this isn't easy, and I know that I actually, along with many other reasons why I've been up for several days, I have a lot of conflicted feelings as a school committee member, as a parent, as a citizen, because I do wonder, and Superintendent, I'd love to hear from you too. I'm mindful that we could send conflicting messages, right, to our parents, that we've decided to go remote, but then we're also considering playing sports. And I do know that there are some that are low risk that may make sense, right, such as cross country and golf. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. So I guess my questions, I'll start with AD Early. Cross country does it require any transportation? Do we have to transport these students anywhere?
Cross country in the city of Springfield, the courses that we use, Denise, are at Forest Park. So Forest Park, we would have to transport the kids over to Forest Park to run in the competitions. We can put 21 adults and kids per bus in order to transport. We cannot go over the number of 21.
Denise, may I interject? Because to your point that the kids are already at home, the transport would be could also be to Forest Park. Because instead of transporting, so I don't know where we would transport, maybe meet the team and then kind of look to transport from the school or from wherever we say to the field, or it could be a requirement that since it's the first transport, to your point, because kids are home, it could be the transport straight to the park.
Yeah, traditionally we would, if we were in school, traditionally the kids would be on campus and get on a bus to go over to Forest Park. However, we know this isn't traditional. So the transportation, we would either have to have kids meet on campus and be transported over to Forest Park, or as Lydia spoke to, have the kids finish their remote day and then go to Forest Park to compete.
How many students do we have in cross country?
So the cross country team is typically about 20 to 25 runners.
Out of one school or throughout the city?
So yeah, no, that's per team. So we have cross country offered at every school, Renaissance, Central, SciTech, Putnam. They all, if they don't have, such as like, for instance, Commerce, they don't have a cross country team, but we co-opt them with another school so that they do have that opportunity.
Okay, and then what about golf? Do they require transportation?
So golf in a traditional year, we don't use a bus for golf. Central is the lone golf team. However, again, if any student in the city wants to participate in golf that goes to a different high school, we co-opt them with the Central team, and the Central team uses their school van to drive over to Veterans Golf Course daily. And
And how
their
many-
team, oh yeah, I was about to say, and their team is about 8 to 12 kids.
All right.
How many students does their van hold?
I think it's a 16 passenger van.
So
In this situation, we might need more than one van. We might need to use 2 vans because we wouldn't be able to put the numbers we used to put on the van, but we'd follow those transportation guidelines. And we'd have, if you voted to move forward with this, we'd have the way of providing transportation for you if you so chose to do that. Some communities that I've talked to are going ahead with sports, not providing transportation. If you were looking for a recommendation, I think if we go ahead with sports, there'd be a lot of kids who couldn't participate if we didn't provide transportation. So we can work out the transportation piece should you want to have sports and provide transportation.
Right, because then it becomes an equity issue because only certain kids would be able to have access if we didn't have transportation.
Couldn't agree with you more, Denise. I think we absolutely, if we're going to do it, I think we provide the transportation. And we'll be able to do that if you wanted to proceed. You know, I think these are Dwayne's recommendations are outstanding. We're not putting anyone in the building, so it doesn't conflict with the vote we made relative to the remote learning because we're not going inside for the volleyball. It's only outside and it's only modified rules like in soccer and only practice in football. So if folks wanted to proceed, we could. It would be safe.
So
but it's a school committee decision.
I agree that they're good recommendations. I do have a couple more questions though, and in particular, because so if we didn't follow what Assistant Superintendent Martinez said, which was that kids could get transported to Forest Park, what would that mean if they came to a campus? And that's for any of them, cross country, soccer, and I'd like to at some point get down to the football. Are they going to use the locker rooms? What's that? What might that look like? Will they have, you know what I mean? Like they're going to be in locker rooms. What would they have to come prepared ahead of time? What would that look like?
Yes, so the locker rooms would be off limits. We wouldn't have locker room use. That's why we're avoiding any of the inside stuff such as volleyball and cheerleading. We don't want to access any of the inside building. They would have to come to campus prepared and ready to go for practice.
And then soccer, Dwayne, can you talk a bit about soccer and what that would look like? Are the soccer teams, I'm sorry, is this just varsity, or we're talking freshman, JV, and varsity? And I know that sometimes we mix JV and varsity. So when we get down to like a soccer, what does that look like? And are the numbers much larger?
The numbers for we will be looking at to provide varsity and JV levels. We want to be equitable. Again, I make the example, if Dwayne Early, say we have Denise Hurst, who's a star soccer player, and we know she's going to make the varsity team, but we have Dwayne Early, who's not so great at soccer. However, he's a great kid. He makes sure he goes to school every single day, and he deserves that chance to play. However, he's at the JV level. So we do want to provide all levels so that every child, no matter what skill level, has the chance to participate.
So it's going to be both JV and varsity.
We're going to look at JV and varsity. Freshman teams, they're really in the past, even when we're at normal, freshmen, you're starting to see freshman teams kind of go by the wayside. The only real big time freshman programs that we have nowadays are the basketball. That's where we get a lot of participation at the freshman level. But other sports, the freshman is kind of dwindling away. So most kids go JV varsity.
But so I guess my question is, how many students are we talking about for soccer?
a soccer team is typically, a coach typically carries 18 kids on his roster for each level. So we're talking probably about around 40 for both levels, JV and varsity. But that's not at all schools. So Denise, Commerce has a smaller participation number. So a Commerce girls soccer team, probably you'll see at the max 15 kids for the girls, and then for the boys about the same. And then you get the bigger schools that have more participation. So it depends on the school. It depends on the school when it comes to participation for that sport, for certain sports.
And, you know, soccer, there's been some modifications to the rules. It may affect the participation rates at some level because there's pretty significant modifications to the rules. But at least under these modified rules, the kids could still participate. It may affect the numbers. We may not have as many kids that want to play under the modified rules. I don't think we know that until we actually try to pull it all together.
Yeah, also, Dan, there's also been, because the soccer modifications are so stringent, we've got officials, the officials boards, there's officials out there who have said that they opt to not officiate this year because the game is going to look a lot different than what soccer is. There's going to be no the modifications are such that when you got to tussle for a ball, that's not going to happen. It's going to be whistled, and there'll be alternate inbounding of the ball. There's not going to they're trying to avoid any of the close proximity as much as they possibly can.
So to that point, Dwayne, can I ask, does it even look like there are going to be other communities that are going to opt in to play soccer?
Yes, Denise, yesterday on a group text I have a group text with the surrounding communities. Ludlow and Westside got the approval last night from their school committee to participate in fall sports as we know it. And then there's going to be more votes. Obviously, we have the vote tonight. By next Tuesday, mostly all the communities will have had their vote. But we got two communities last night that approved the play.
But Dwayne, for most of our surrounding community, even though the school committees have not voted yet, the recommendation is to play, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And speaking with fellow ADs, and they've spoken with their superintendent, their assistant superintendent, and the plan is the recommendation is to play fall sports. They're just waiting for those votes to come in.
May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes, absolutely.
So I have a question about the face mask requirement. And although I understand it, I'm trying to visualize having kids running around back and forth, whether it be soccer or whether it be track, and the amount of exertion that it takes for them to do that without wearing a covering. And then now them wearing a covering, and it says here that they're even suggesting multiple layers of a covering. I'm really concerned about how that might affect them physically. I know walking across campus with my mask on, because we have to put it on since we get out of our car. We have to have the mask on walking across campus for 10 minutes. And a lot of times when I get up to walk up the stairs and get into my office, I'm usually a little bit like, wow, I need to get this thing off quickly so I can breathe. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned about that. My kids played, one of my sons played, well, my only son played baseball, and they did so in a very safe way, and you know, they all had their mask and everything. But again, I was highly concerned because the mask and the ability for them to breathe. So how are we measuring what that is, and what type of scientific proof do we have that it's going to be safe for them to wear that kind of covering and that kind of intense activity?
So the modifications when they were brought out, they were brought out by the folks who have the expertise in that field, and their suggestion is that they wear the mask and that it is safe doing so. However, when they come to breaks and when kids are separated or socially distanced, that they could take it off really quickly and then put it back on. But from what the EEA has said, they're the people who have the expertise in this, and they're saying that the mask will be okay to be worn during competition.
I also read that the MIAA wasn't requiring mask. Did I read that incorrectly?
They are not. They are suggesting mask. They are suggesting mask when kids are on the sideline. However, when they're in competition, it can be optional.
Well, I mean, I think that makes more sense, to be honest. I just know that, I mean, I could get when they're sitting beside each other or whatever on the sideline that they would have their mask on, so they're not talking to one another and all of that. But I don't know. I'm just not convinced that kids running around a track with a mask covering their nose and their mouth is safe. I just visualize somebody passing out. And I wonder, and not that I question the experts, but I wonder how many of them have practiced trying to run around the track with a mask on themselves. I don't know. So I'm concerned about that piece of it. I do think that, you know, a lot of the other protocol that they have as far as like the temperature checks and everything, I think that these are really great guidelines in theory. And I think if they're applied, that absolutely our kids will be safe. I think that's the only part of it that I'm concerned about, is just us mandating them to wear a face covering while they're trying to run around the course or wherever for track. For golf, I can get it. They're not moving so much. But for track and for soccer, with that exertion that they're putting out, I'm really concerned about that piece of it. Although I understand why it's necessary.
So, okay. So shall we tackle, you know, I actually am in full agreement with the postponing of the two that you have there for the fall season. But I would like to talk about the practice only of the high risk, because that I have a great deal of concern about, or a concern around. So AD, because I actually looked while we were just on the phone. I see that East Hampton also voted yesterday. I don't see anyone else practicing. Why would we practice football if we have until March?
So the intent to practice is kind of what the intent is for everything else, is to get kids some sort of engagement, to keep them in some sort of like feeling of being like they have a team, and to hold off to March to get these kids together. I mean, it would be when the safest to hold off to March, but to have the practice in the small groups of 10 in the skill positions would just again give these kids something to cling to, something like most kids these days, they really look forward to something, and we're trying to just give them a little bit of something to keep them motivated.
And so we're talking about so Central's football team is massive. So how many groups of 10 are we talking about? And will they also not have access to a locker room? Right, so
yes,
they're gonna come to campus with pads on and leave campus with pads on?
Again, they would not be allowed in the building and access to the locker room, so they would have to come prepared to practice. And the thinking of ADs in the surrounding communities are that we would put them in groups based on their skill, based on their position. So, for instance, football, one day the group of 10 that comes into practice might be the linemen. So they practice on blocking techniques and conditioning and things like that. And then another day might be where they come in with the quarterbacks come in, and the running backs and the wide receivers, and they practice the throwing and running through plays and also conditioning. So we would put them in groups based on their skill position. Again, like you said, the football team at Central is upwards of 80 to 100 kids. We do use Blunt Park, which is a rather large field, and we could space them out in groups of 10 and make it work by doing the different shifts of, like, Monday the linemen come in, Tuesday the quarterbacks come in, Wednesday the wide receivers, so on and so forth, and we would rotate them in like that.
And how long would they be practicing for? Like, because at some point it's going to get cold and it's going to get snowy. So would they be practicing all the way up until that fall season 2 started?
So their practice would run at the start of fall season 1 and would end at the end of fall season 1, which is going to be around November. So they would practice from September to November. And then they would have the winter season off, and then they would reconvene in March to come back, because that's when their season's going to be played.
LaTonya, do you have any thoughts, questions? I guess I'll be honest, Dwayne, and I want nothing more for these kids to be able to engage. But when it comes to the football piece, Superintendent, I am concerned. And I'm also concerned because we're going to be in the middle of flu season. I'm concerned about the number of kids that we're going to have out there, the number of kids that are going to need to carpool to get there and to get home. I don't know. I have reserve around the practice piece.
I'm equally concerned about the football piece, also because I'm thinking about the mask, right? And so I was just doing some more reading and, recommendations from other districts beyond the state. And the consensus pretty much is that kids wear masks whenever they're engaged in any activity that's going to require them to be close contact, close proximity. However, in certain sports where there's high exertion, they're saying that it could actually be a health concern for kids to have masks on. So when you think about football, there is a lot of exertion. They would definitely need to have a mask on just because they're literally breathing on one another. I think that's not a safe situation right now for many reasons, and mostly because we would have to mandate that they have a mask. And I think that in cross country, for example, that to me, if MIAA is saying that it is optional, I can agree with it being optional because it makes sense. And to me, even if none of the kids were running and they had masks on, I think it would be a much safer situation in having kids in football doing that. So I think that we should postpone them practicing and at least get to see what some of these other sports look like, and kids, excuse me, being active in some of these low risk sports, and what does that look like before we can make a decision on whether or not we allow them to start engaging in a high risk sport. Even if it is practice, I still don't feel safe making a decision for that high risk activity.
So can I ask a couple logistical questions and to AD Early and Assistant Superintendent Martinez? One is, and I think LaTonya may have said it, are they requiring temperature checks? I saw somewhere in the MIAA that the kids are going to need to produce a COVID test. Is that going to be something that the district takes on, or we're going to have parents do that on their own? And then how is that all going to work? Because that seems like a huge lift.
So they still have to have their physicals, Denise. So we're thinking that would be all part of the same kind of qualifications that the kids have to kind of provide, like the physicals, because those are still going to be required.
So they would get a COVID test when they got their physical.
That's the thought.
And are we doing temperature checks or no? Because DESE wasn't requiring it if we went back to school. Is the MIAA and DESE requiring it for sports?
Dwayne?
They are not requiring the temperature checks for sports. However, if that's a safety precaution that you would like to put in, we could look into the purchase of possibly getting the contactless thermometers, and we could look into that.
Okay,
I just,
so am I misreading the modification? Because it said based on the EEA guidelines that these were requirements. So MIAA may not be requiring them, but it's saying that EEA guidelines, I think. So are we following the EEA guidelines, or are those just suggestions and then we take it into consideration when we make our choice as to how we want to implement the sports?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead, Dwayne.
Dwayne, yeah.
So yes, of course, we are following those guidelines and sports-specific guidelines. So if that was a requirement, we would absolutely follow that, Latonia.
I think based on what I'm seeing here as requirements and what it's saying, I think these are really good requirements. I think they're actually better than the DESI recommendations. And I think that if we abide by them, that kids will be safe and staff will be safe. I think I'm going to be stuck on a mask thing just with them being in the middle of activity. Just looking at the different mixed reviews from experts, that some just say it's just not safe. But I understand why. I mean, we don't want people breathing on each other. That's my only concern, Denise, really, to be honest with you, is, you know, if we can follow these guidelines that are mentioned here in the modifications, and if we can make sure that, you know, people are doing their part to follow these, I think that at least for the low risk sports, that we could absolutely roll with it. And
so I was just looking to, so Dwayne, do you guys follow the EEA or you follow MIAA and DESI? Like what, or do you follow a combination of the three? What is being followed?
The EEAA, and the DESI and the MIA, we're following all of those. So if in fact, if you see that the requirement is for temperature check, then that will be followed to the letter to provide the safety of everyone involved.
Okay. So I didn't see the temperature check. I did see like you had to have a daily checklist though, like a daily COVID checklist. Superintendent, are we prepared to be able to do temperature checks? Like, do we have that capability?
I think we could do it for sports right now if we needed to and people wanted to. Again, every bit of DESI guidance I read on it said too many false positives, too many false negatives, not to use it for school. So I don't think it's a good idea for school. And I talked to Jeannie Clancy about it. She agreed with that. But if we wanted to do it for sports, the numbers would be such where it would be easy to administer if you wanted to add that. I think the problem is here you have the MIAA guidelines, you had the EEA, that's the youth sports and everything else, right? So trying to find it, and then DESI kind of also, so you're trying to mix it. But I think we could do the temperature checks if you wanted us to do it for sports. All the guidance from DESI and that I've read is against doing a temperature check.
And Superintendent, sorry, Latonia, we do have the equipment on hand. So
Yeah,
if it was the, you know, the wish of the school committee, we definitely have the equipment to do it.
To do it as an extra precaution for sports, we could absolutely do it. I think that, you know, with the too many false positives and negatives for school would make it very, very difficult. So that's been all the advice.
Were you going to say something, Latonia? I'm sorry.
yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, based on the way it reads, it says that the temperature should be checked. It doesn't say who has to check it, but I think that, you know, I was in a conversation yesterday with the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA and South End Community Center, and they're talking about how they were able to manage not having any COVID cases in their buildings as they had to do summer programming. And one of the things that they did is daily, they checked temperatures. As a matter of fact, they did it 3 times a day. They checked it when kids came in around lunchtime, and then when kids got ready to go home. And what it did for them is it allowed them to be able to, even if kids' temperatures might run high normally, but what it did is it helped them to be able to ascertain if kids were in a situation where something might be changing in their body and that they needed to be checked. And so I think that even if kids don't have COVID, if they're in danger of having the flu or something else, that's still a concern that if somebody's running a temperature, that they should not be engaging in sports. So I'm not looking at it as just a COVID related thing. I'm looking at it as in general, just making sure that everybody is safe, because COVID, the flu, they all look the same until they get tested. You know what I mean? And so that's where I'm coming from. I think, to the superintendent's point, it's a much smaller cohort, so I think it's much more feasible for us to be able to do it. I think that it would also show that, you know, we're trying to be as proactive as possible. And I don't think it takes away from us to do it. I think it's definitely something that will help.
So would it be fair to say then that it's sort of like, in summary, that we are supportive of the recommendations that have been brought forth? However, we want to ensure that there are going to be temperature checks, that there is that daily checkoff sheet for COVID. I do think it's really important to really nail down or clarify what's going to happen with transportation and who's going to be on the bus, and that parents and students, or parents and the parents and students know the expectations around you know, coming to campus and not having access to locker rooms, the face mask while on the side. You know, I think it'll be really important, Superintendent, to make sure that that's included in the narrative that Zell puts out around, you know, why the recommendations were made. But I also, you know, I'll be honest, and I'm really stuck on the football piece. And so, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the recommendation. I don't know. I don't know. Mary Jo, are you still here? Where are you, attorney? I'm wondering, you know, how do we parse it out? Do we just move it all forward and allow the full committee to have a say and weigh in?
You make a recommendation, yes, to the school committee to do certain things, and your recommendation then can be discussed more fully at the full school level.
Would it be reasonable to say you feel pretty good about these, but you wanted more discussion on the practice only and let everyone weigh in on the football practice piece?
Sure. And in the meantime, and Dwayne, I know that we only have a few hours between now and so for me, I feel like I don't necessarily always want to base something on what others are doing. I do think that it's a good barometer to know, like, what are other communities doing, but we also know that we are one of, you know, the larger communities here in the area. We know that our demographics don't mirror those of other communities. So I don't know that it's fair to that we're comparing apples to apples. So I guess I'm just mindful of, you know, that one district might be doing one thing, but it's, you know, they only have like 20 kids, as opposed to we have almost 80 to 100. And I don't know, I don't know. So
this is a hard decision. I
it
think
is.
so. It's a very hard decision, but I thought Dwayne did a great job trying to pull it all.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
100% agree with, I 100% agree with it. Thank you, Dwayne and Lydia. I also think that it's really important, which is the same thing that came up when we were trying to make the decisions around school, is what is going to happen if we find that there is a potential cluster, right? That 1, 2, 3 kids are now testing positive. Like how, like, you know, we have to have a plan in place for how we're going to say, you know, no, this is what's going to happen, and, you know, this is going to cease. And being really transparent about that. And there's a lot of confidentiality, right? A HIPAA issues that also come along with that. So I guess I would like to see more around that as well.
Yeah. So Denise, there have been discussions of having sign-in sheets to speak to the what you just spoke about, is the potential of a cluster. So if we're keeping them in groups and we're having them sign in, we can almost, if a member of a cohort of 10 is test positive, then we can notify that group of 10. That's why we're not mixing and matching the groups day to day. We're keeping them in the same group so that we can kind of trace if that does occur.
So we could do the contact tracing, and we'd have Jeannie working with Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the clusters are for the football.
Right.
Also for the 10 clusters, which is why the decision is that they would be just that 10 group of kids away from the other ones for the contact tracing piece of it. And then there are some guidelines around, if you get X amount of cases, we would have to cease, but we could put all that in writing, and we can work on that immediately. Denise, if that helps.
Yes, it would. All right. Latona, do you have any further questions?
I guess my only other question is, this is MIAA specific to high school. Are we having any thoughts about intramural at the middle school level?
Not at this time. At this time, we're recommending high school.
Okay. All right.
And so, like at Duggan, where they have that mix of students, do any of those middle schoolers play in the high school sports?
Yes, Denise. In fact, we have that as well at our Renaissance. They have that combination where if you attend Renaissance or Duggan, the middle schoolers are allowed to participate at the high school level after 7th grade, however. Pastor, you have to be in 7th grade, not 6th graders.
Okay.
Yeah, for instance, my son played JV basketball at Duggan last winter, and he was only in 7th grade because they allow the 7th graders
to play up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. You know, I mean, I think we recommend that it go to the full board, and there be some discussion this evening.
I agree.
I think that's a great recommendation, because this we recognize this is controversial, but we certainly want to hear what everyone says, and that's the reason for the vote. And we get it if folks feel the other way on some of the recommendations. It definitely is controversial, but I think the thought process would be try to do what we could safely. And this football's practice only kept in certain cohort groups. But again, if the majority of the committee doesn't feel we should move forward with it, we're good with that. We just wanted to put some recommendations together about the possibilities. And it's a tough decision, so I'm not trying to minimize it.
No,
Right.
absolutely. But very important. I mean, I think it's an important that it be brought forth to the full
entire
committee.
committee. Yeah, so I think that's a great recommendation to get everyone's, let everyone weigh in. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So is there a motion to recommend to the full committee the recommendations for fall sports based on the guidance from MIAA and DESE?
Yes, so moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. I think roll call votes are required, Terry. Sorry.
That is correct.
I'm getting better. I'm getting better. Mary Jo.
No problem. Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
And Ms. Gresham is absent.
All right, thank you, Dwayne and Lydia. I know that that is a ton of work, and I know that we want our kids to have some level of normalcy. Believe me, I completely understand, but I also think we need to be really mindful and vigilant about the decisions that we make and making sure that everybody is as safe as possible and
Yes.
their families.
Yeah, we
Yes,
agree with you, Ms. Hirsch. Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
100%. The concerns are very valid, and that's why we're waiting for your guidance and understand everything that you put forth.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Thank you. So we'll see you all, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm like, is it not tonight?
Oh, no, it's tonight. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
tonight.
No.
And again, Denise, you weren't here when we talked about the links. Patty's going to send out 2 links for the meetings tonight. So just keep an eye out for that.
Yep, but just so you guys know, when I sent Superintendent Warwick a message, I can't be a part of, I
Correct.
have to recuse myself from executive session when it's those bargaining units.
Yes, Patty knows that too.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So I'll be on for the 6:30.
6:30.
Yep.
We so appreciate you pulling this meeting together. The timelines are short. We didn't have a lot of time, so thanks.
No
thanks
worries.
for all your
No
work on it.
worries.
We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Good one.
Thank you both.
You're
Lydia,
welcome.
all set?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You guys
Yeah,
have a good
nice
day.
job, Dwayne, Lydia, great job. That wasn't easy to put all that together, so.
Dan, do you want us to kind of talk to Jeannie real quick to talk about for tonight to be prepared to do the contact tracing and to see what protocols could be put in place if they so decide they want the temperature checks, or
Yep.
do you
We're
want to
on-
wait to the school committee?
We're on Focus Springfield now, just so we all know. Yeah, we're being recorded.
So
Yeah.
I will call you, Dan.
Yeah, but yes is the answer. Yeah, the double check. I'm absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get right on it. Dwayne, I'll call you.
She's been
Okay.
great. And so is
Bye,
Health.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.